On Sunday, October 2nd of 2005, a blog was started called the Indian Lake Project. This blog is a story of conspiracy, experimentation, and cover-up, all of which was experienced by the writer of this blog and the protagonist of our story, John. So, to start this story, I think it's best that we start at the beginning. On July 9th, 1997, my uncle was hiking in a wooded area around Indian Lake, New York. He tripped on what he thought was a tree root sticking slightly above the ground. When he looked back, he noticed the corner of this box above the ground. The fact that he was far from any marked path or road, and was in an area that few, if any, usually hike, sparked his curiosity. The box was sticking up by only 2 or 3 inches, and from the look of the ground around the box, he figured it had been there quite a while. With only sticks to dig with, it took him a while to pry it from the ground. The 3 shapes on the top of the box, an upside-down triangle and 2 circles, were only apparent after it was later cleaned up. The box had no lock on it and was easily opened. Inside the box, my uncle found 21 water-damaged photos, 3 8mm home movie reels, and various documents. Most of the photos are of children, which led my uncle to fear the worst, that he had stumbled upon evidence of a crime involving children. He mentioned that his blood ran cold when he began to read the documents also found in the box. He indeed had stumbled upon the crime involving children, but instead of some, we're gonna say child diddler, so YouTube doesn't get mad at me, child diddler, it seemed that these children were all part of some United States government experimentation. Those experiments were known as the ILP, or the Indian Lake Project. In 2002, my uncle died. This box was given to me shortly before he passed away. He was afraid of the contents in the box and wished he had never found it. I feel it's my obligation to share its contents and the truth behind what has been buried for 50 years. I was immediately hooked by that first blog post. It sounds so interesting that it delves into conspiracy and also kind of urban legend and really builds on that. So yeah, one video in, we're already diving into conspiracies. Pretty cool. If I'm dead tomorrow, it was the government. So, the next post is him showing the box. Not the contents in it yet, he's getting to that, saying he's going to scan it, but John shares these photos of the box, and yeah, it looks like an old box. In the next post, we get to see 2 photos that were in the box. One is of 2 soldiers standing outside of the Indian Lake Project, presumably, as well as what appears to be the outside, potentially bunks or buildings. It's unclear exactly what's inside the building, but it's known to be a part of the Indian Lake Project, as well as we get some background info on it. It is revealed to us through the text that John has accompanying these photos that the Indian Lake Project was in operation from 1952 to 1955, during which time it was highly classified. The following blog post also has 2 photos like the last one does. This time, though, it shows people within the Indian Lake Project, these being some military personnel, as well as the children that were being experimented on in the Indian Lake Project. It is worth noting here that there are no writing on these photos on the back front anywhere, so it's impossible to identify the people within the Indian Lake Project. The next blog post shows 3 photos this time, though it actually has names of the children that are in the photos. Roger, Sammy, and Sally are the quoted names along with numbers printed on the face of the photos. These are obviously not the children's real names, but assigned names. As I looked at the names and numbers the first time my uncle showed them to me, I didn't quite grasp what it meant. I remember that my uncle had told me Roger was probably one child out of 837 based on his number, kept at the camp. His word kept struck me as both eerie and accurate. The numbers circled in red on both Sally and Roger's photographs, I believe, are the age of the children at the time of the placement. We can see through that Roger is 4 and Sally is, I don't know if I'm stupid. I can't read that. It's because I like the weathering on the photo. I feel so stupid right now. We're just gonna move on. The next blog post also focuses on Sally, though this time with 2 photos again. The one that we just saw, and one that we saw earlier. John is comparing the girl in these 2 photos, believing them both to be Sally, though potentially taken years apart. And that, it's really unsettling to hear, to see one like, oh, this is her when she was younger, just starting to get experimented on, and this is her a couple years after, through being experimented on, still being experimented on. That's not cool, man. It can also be implied because of that the children were raised at the camp by the military personnel there and weren't allowed to leave. Which, again, that's not cool. So in the next post, John shares that it's kind of hard to find information on the Indian Lake Project since he's the only one that knows about it. The only thing that allows him to even know about it is the box that his uncle found in the woods. And he shares that though it may take time, he will try and unravel this mystery. The next day, he shares this photo with the following text. I think this photo is very telling. It was included in the box for a reason. It shows 2 men, 1 civilian, and 1 military. The civilian man, perhaps one of the scientists or project doctors, is recognizable. The second man has purposely had his face obscured. It looks as if the photo is telling us that the civilian is important to the ILP, while trying to protect the identity of the officer he is shown with. Could that officer be the man whose box it was? Was he trying to shed light on the subject without exposing himself? Maybe the civilian is a key figure in the tragic Indian Lake Project experiments. Look closely in between the 2 men, and you can see one of the ILP children. So, there's potentially a whistleblower within the Indian Lake Project. This will be someone who would know information about this, potentially who stashed the box whenever they were getting rid of the evidence, to make sure that someone found this, and could potentially the people running the Indian Lake Project answer for their crimes. Like we heard in the beginning, photos are not all that John found. He also found old film reels. Though he says he has no way to get these developed yet, he can see the stills of the film reels and sees children in cages. That's bad. Going back to the film reels, we see some photos of kids maybe being experimented on. They have headphones on. An operator's hands are really close to their face. Really close. Not sure what's going on there. But that could be some experimentation. Again, it's really unknown. It's from more of the film reels, so it almost definitely is. But the nature of it is just kind of left in the air, like a lot of this is. But what we do have next is a little history lesson from John on what he thinks Indian Lake Project is, and oh boy, we're in for something. So on Tuesday, October 11th, 2005, John posts the following. Project Artichoke was a CIA project that researched interrogation methods and arose from Project Bluebird in 1951. The project studied hypnosis along other methods to produce amnesia in subjects. Project Artichoke was an offensive program of mind control that gathered together the intelligence divisions of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and FBI. So all that kind of checks out, right? Like government experiments, projects, and stuff. We're aware of that. We know this stuff happens. But it's from here that John kind of goes conspiracy theory mode. While it does seem believable given the subject of the case, he really just kind of found one thing and then tied it over, which you'll see here. I believe the ILP was part of Project Artichoke. Project Artichoke was renamed Project MKUltra in 1953 and was first brought to the wide public attention by the U.S. Congress in the form of the Church Committee and a presidential commission known as the Rockefeller Commission. Central Intelligence Agency documents suggest that the agency considered and explored uses of radiation for the purpose of mind control as part of MKUltra. Other early efforts focused on LSD, which appears to have formed the majority of research as time went on. Experiments included dosing CIA employees, military personnel, other government agents, prostitutes, mental patients, and members of the general public with LSD to study their reactions, usually without the subject's knowledge. When Project Artichoke became MKUltra, the ILP's role was reduced and then eliminated. There are many declassified documents from the congressional hearings. None, however, mention very young children being used in MKUltra experiments. I think by then the ILP was buried, both literally and figuratively. So yeah, that's kind of a lot to take in at once, but John basically believes that the Indian Lake Project was an off-branch of MKUltra / Project Artichoke before it was name changed, even though there's been no mention of this in the congressional hearings or documents or anything like that. Which, yeah, it's bad enough for the government to say, hey, we experimented on a good chunk of you guys. Hope we're still cool, which is kind of what happened. But to say, hey, not only do we experiment on a bunch of you guys, but also your kids and children and stuff, that's worse, which further makes the conspiracy go way deeper than just a kind of niche group. Having it be a part of this bigger experiment really deepens the conspiracy. So John shares some photos of the woods, this time modern photos that he took himself. He said that when his uncle had given him the box, he had basically made him a hand-drawn map of the area around where he found it, and with that, John was able to go to Indian Lake, New York, to around the wooded area, and he said he explored there for about 3 hours until he found these photos of structures in the woods that he believes is where the Indian Lake Project was housed. Or by Wednesday, October 26, 2005, John had been sharing his discoveries for most of the month of October, and it gained some traction online. People were interested in it, wanted to know more, and were helping him investigate the Indian Lake Project. But it's because of that traction that John shares the following. Since my last post, a lot of things have happened to me, which makes me believe that posting any more items from the box would not be in my best interest. I've had numerous phone calls, only to hear silence on the other end of the line, as many as 20 times a day. My house was broken into and searched, but nothing was taken. The box and its contents had been securely hidden out of my home. I did this shortly after the phone calls began. It is obvious to me that I hit a nerve when I mentioned the documents I have, and that I was considering perhaps posting them at some point. I am no longer going to post anything. I am done. I hope that anyone who stumbles upon this site will read it from the beginning and continue to stay interested in this story. For all of you who have followed this blog, I am sorry, but my family and their peace of mind comes first. As disturbing as these photos and documents are, the last few days for me and my family have been even more so, which is why I'm saying goodbye. So it looks like that's the end of the story, right? John's done. They've intimidated him enough because he's digging too deep into this conspiracy and seemingly has the key to it, but he can't risk anything happening to his family. And that's what people thought for a while. That is until about 8 months later, when John is back, and he makes the following post. After careful consideration, and much encouragement from your countless emails, I've decided to begin posting once again. My apprehension is only counted by my determination to find answers and bring awareness to those children who became victims of the Indian Lake Project during the years 1952 to 1955. Much has happened since I stopped posting, and I will share with you what I feel I can at this time. This is a horrifying true-life mystery that for me will not go away. So John shares that he's back because he split with his wife, who has his kids, and that because of that, he feels he's not putting anyone in danger and is free to post. So, good for you, John. Way to look on the positives, dude. But more importantly to the actual case itself, he shares that he received an email from a woman claiming to have first-hand knowledge of what happened at the Indian Lake Project. John then shares the emails that he received from the woman. Dear John, I reached your website through the blank website forums page. On it, I was surprised to read the words Indian Lake Project. My father was stationed at the camp that was known as the ILP in 1955. His name was, and that's censored again for the blog, I'd be interested in knowing if his name is mentioned in any of the documents you have in your possession. As a little girl, I used to overhear my mother and father talking about the children of the ILP. I could tell you things that would make your jaw drop to the floor. You are close, but I can fill in the blanks. On that, John comments, his name was on the camp personnel manifest. for all years, not just 1955. So he was there from 52 through 55, from the beginning to the end. There was absolutely no way anyone would know that name and its connection to the Indian Lake Project, unless she was who she said she was. Before I immediately responded, I began to think that maybe this was somehow a way for, whatever reason, her to gain my confidence and begin to manipulate me. I did not email back for 3 weeks while I went it all over in my mind. This was obviously someone who knew something. In March, I finally decided to see where this journey was going to take me next, and I responded. I have since learned a lot more about the ILP, the children, the experiments, and the men and women who worked there. I believe this person to be genuine and will post more of her information soon. So that post alluded to it. Throughout the rest of the story, we'll see John's increasing paranoia, justified or not. He gets a little uneasy about things. And that starts in the next post about the same woman in the last one. After being in contact with the woman I mentioned in my last post for the past several months, I'm beginning to have second thoughts about her and her motives. I agreed, at her suggestion, that we work together on this project. We began to share what each of us had, her knowledge based on her father's military career and connection to the camp, and my documents, pictures, and film. Maybe I should have known better, but when you find someone who has knowledge of something like this, you just get sucked in. I began to grow suspicious of her when she wanted me to send her the originals so that she could see them in person. Something I did not do. She was more than willing to send me personal effects left by her father, which seemed odd to me. There have been several things she has said or told me that don't add up, and my feeling now is that she's not sincere in her motives, or that she is even who she says she is. I've cut off all communications with her, and I am back on my own. She did have genuine knowledge that I could specifically confirm, but where she got that knowledge keeps me up at night. The worst part is, all the information I've gathered from her over the past months is suspect at best, and pure deception at worst. John cuts her off from the project, basically. Or in the next post, he shares a photo, not from the metal box, but one he just found online, of a little girl being experimented on with LSD and electroshock therapy. And apparently at the end of the text it says that she, after the experimentation, had the mind of an infant because they basically erased all her mind and memory and stuff. He notes that this could be a connection between ILP and MKUltra, since this is really the only time MKUltra seems to have shown a child being experimented on, even though they said they didn't do that. In the next blog post, John shares that the woman who emailed him about her father working at the ILP, that he'd since cut off, is now back. He said, we call her Mary now, presumably an alias, and that she's been emailing him again. He says, Mary has been trying to mend the mistrust I have for her through countless emails. She sent me a photo taken during World War II of members of the U.S. Army and the Nazis. The disturbing part of this photo is that they look like they're old friends and not enemies. She says, this is a photo that belonged to her father, who was stationed at the Indian Lake, and offered it up as proof to something I've suspected, that the Indian Lake Project, Project Artichoke, and MKUltra all have their roots in Nazi research. She also claims that the picture actually shows her father, who's the German officer. Look, none of that's good, right? But that does kind of seem like jumping the shark a bit, because while he does kind of trust what the woman is saying, just immediately being like, hey, look at these photos of two soldiers on different sides. Yeah, it's really weird that they look all chummy and like buddies together, but because of that, being like, oh, well, clearly this project starts with Nazi research, it's kind of a jump. John shares that he still doesn't trust Mary, but he thinks there's some merit to what she's saying. He notes the similarities in the next post between the soldier, the American soldier in the World War II photo, as well as a soldier in an ILP photo. But again, it's just that they look alike. They might be the same, who knows? But we can't really prove anything. From here, John does still try and share connections of the ILP to Nazi research, Project Paperclip, which is where Nazis, the US kind of just went, hey, you can work for us now. and also MK Ultra and stuff. He's really just kind of grasping at straws and dancing around subjects. He keeps getting asked why he doesn't just scan the documents and post them, as people are emailing him and asking him, hey, if you have this, like, definitive proof that only you know right now, it'd be great if you shared it. We could expose the people that did this potentially, see background checks, run if everything checks out, that we could actually do something about this. John just kind of goes, oh, well, I'm cool with posting about it, but I don't want to, like, share them. I'm cool with telling you guys they exist, and you guys just, like, trust me. But that's a step I'm not ready to take yet. Like, dude, you're already this far in. You've posted everything else, potentially people's faces and stuff. Like, it's just the one last thing. The thing that you're swearing, hey, I know I have this, just believe me. Just share it. But, spoiler alert, he doesn't. Ever. Nothing really interesting happens for a while. It's more just John posting, this doctor could be connected to the ILP. Oh, not him, maybe this one. And really just kind of getting crappy with people trying to debunk him. Except he goes into the woods and finds an underground bunker, basically. But he believes it's connected to the ILP, and he shares some photos of it, as well as this map that shows the rough layout of it. He believes this could be something huge in the case. Potentially this has something to do with it. It's also during this time that he shares he has completely cut contact with Mary, for good this time. John's next blog post, though, is kinda weird. I got an email yesterday from a gentleman who said he was from America's ResearchGate. Has anyone ever heard of this before? The email he received says the following. Hello, John. I have ties to America's ResearchGate. ARG determines when the gates are open and when they are closed. This contact will only happen once, and it's the only time the gate will be opened. Signed, G. Cowsill. The gate is now closed. So that's probably not good. He also says he looked up the America ResearchGate and found absolutely nothing. So, kind of a dead lead. I've been sparing a lot of the blog posts that John shared. Like, a lot of them. Because most of them don't really amount to anything. It tends to be either him just talking about MK Ultra, just sharing photos of stuff he found in the woods, saying, this has to tie into Indian Lake because it's near the area that I deemed that would probably is where it happened. I'm not going over every single blog post. There will be a link in the description if you do want to read those, which I'd encourage because it is an interesting story. But a lot of it is really just kind of his paranoia that I talked about earlier, really just coming to a head. An example of John's mounting paranoia at this point is he said after he received the email from ARG that he's noticed unmarked white vans following him around. He has a photo of one, it's really blurry, but you can tell it's an unmarked white van. But again, how much of this, just given everything he said, how much of this can really be boiled down to conspiracy, and how much is just him being paranoid? And not long after that, he finds a dead bird outside of his house, which, like, is sad. I'm not saying that, like, that happens. And he immediately thinks it's the people trying to cover up the ILP, trying to intimidate him. It's here where he really loses me. Like, the white vans and stuff, okay, cool. That could happen, right? But the dead bird, like, I don't really want to open my front door and find a dead bird, but that stuff happens now and then. That doesn't mean it's someone trying to intimidate me. And I feel like if it's the government, a dead bird wouldn't be their go-to, right? Like, especially if it's someone who has this much leverage to cover it. I know I said I'd save my thoughts on all of this at the end, but, like, come on, dude, it's a dead bird. He also sees a helicopter flying overhead and immediately assumes it's the government following him after the dead bird incident. Our story ends super unceremoniously. On February 25th, 2013, John shares that he will now be updating things on his Twitter account, at Indian Lake Project. And that was never posted to after that. He made the one post basically saying this is what this is, and then it's been dead now for almost 10 years. So, with all the story we have laid out before us, we basically have all the puzzle pieces that John has provided for us. Is the Indian Lake Project real? I feel very confident in saying absolutely not. And I have a few reasons why. First, we'll go with less cut and dry stuff, just nitpicks. The photos, if you look at them at the beginning, like of the children and stuff, that's not really how photos age. I'm not an expert on this. Most of this is stuff people have pointed out that were following this as it was unraveling. The photos are really inconsistent in how they're damaged, water damaged, like he says, and how they're aged. My second point of contention is the box itself. While he does imply that a whistleblower put it there, it seems unlikely that they got all these important documents, as well as tons of photos and film reels, and was just kind of able to just sneak out of the base with them, bury them to where it's still poking above the dirt, and just have no one notice that those were missing. I guess it depends how quickly they would have evacuated the facility, but it doesn't sound like it's because they were discovered. It just sounds like it was because Indian Lake Project was disbanded, because MK Ultra kind of overtook it. So it seems unlikely that stuff like that would just go missing for a whistleblower to bury. Not saying impossible, but unlikely. And the absolute most damning piece of evidence for this is that many of the photos that John shared, John didn't take. They were stock photos that he found online. An example is the dead bird, which he said was an intimidation by the government to silence him. That was a stock photo. He found that online, which if you're gonna use something as simple as a dead bird for intimidation, and you're not even gonna have the photo yourself, why not go bigger? It's because of those reasons I feel very comfortable saying the Indian Lake Project is not real. It was a fun little story posted by a user, but ultimately I'd say it's fake. That being said, I really like the Indian Lake Project story. Well, yeah, I poked holes at it most of the time and kind of made fun of it. I think it's a really fun story. From the first post, I was hooked. I thought it was really compelling, and it is plausible that something like this could happen. Again, the military experiments besides the Indian Lake Project that John covers, those happened. MK Ultra happened. So it's not unfathomable that it could have been an off branch of something like that where they experimented on children. Because if they're already experimenting on people, I don't think the government's really the ones to be like, oh, no. The kids are off limits. It's the government that's experimenting on people, dude. At the end of the day, it's a really great story. It really captivated me. But I don't think it's true. It was fun to go through and read, though. Like I said, I would highly recommend checking it out. Link will be in the description if you do want to see it. That'll be it for today, though. So if you liked the video, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Especially if you like spooky stuff, as that's primarily what I'll be posting here. But that'll be it for today. I really hope you enjoyed hearing about the Indian Lake Project, and I'll see you guys next time.